Four teenagers went camping by a quiet lake in Finland. By sunrise, three of them were dead, and the only survivor said he couldn't remember what happened. More than 60 years later, no one knows who did it. This is the story of the Lake Bodom murders. June 4th, 1960. Lake Bodom, just outside Helsinki. It was the kind of place people went to escape. Calm water, open space, nothing but nature around you. On a summer evening, it would have felt peaceful. Almost too peaceful. That's where four teenagers decided to spend the night. Nils Gustafsson and Seppo Boisman, both 18, set out for the lake with their girlfriends, Maila Björklund and Anja Maki, who were both just 15 years old. It wasn't anything unusual, just a simple overnight trip. They brought a tent, rowed out to the lake, and picked a spot close to the water. As the evening went on, they were seen by a few people around the area. Just four young people, talking, laughing, moving between campsites, blending into the normal life of a summer night. At some point, there was drinking. Nothing extreme, but enough that one witness later claimed there may have been some tension earlier in the evening. Exactly what happened, no one could ever say for sure. Eventually, the night settled. The lake grew quiet. The other campers went to sleep, and so did they. All four of them climbed into their tent, likely thinking nothing of it. No sense of danger, no reason to feel unsafe. But sometime in the early hours of June 5th, something happened. By the time the sun came up, the peaceful campsite had turned into a crime scene. Three of the teenagers were dead. Seppo Boisman, Maila Björklund, Anja Maki. The tent had collapsed. The scene was chaotic, violent, and deeply disturbing to anyone who saw it. The only survivor, Nils Gustafsson, was found just outside the tent. He was badly injured. His jaw was broken. His face had multiple fractures. He had suffered a concussion and was barely conscious when he was discovered. He had no shoes on. His body was covered in blood. And when he was later questioned, he said he remembered almost nothing. That detail alone would haunt this case for decades, because Nils was the only person who could have seen what happened, and he couldn't explain it. Or at least, that's what he said. From the very beginning, the investigation had problems. The crime scene was not properly secured in time. People had already walked through the area before police could fully lock it down. In doing so, they may have unknowingly destroyed crucial evidence. Footprints, movement, anything that could have pointed to a suspect, possibly gone. And then there were the missing items. Some belongings belonging to the victims had disappeared. Clothing, personal items, and most notably, Nils's shoes. Those shoes were later found some distance away from the tent. They were stained with the blood of the victims, but not with Nils's own blood. That detail raised serious questions. If Nils had been inside the tent during the attack, how did his shoes end up somewhere else, marked only with the blood of the others? Was that evidence of something being moved or something being staged? Investigators didn't have a clear answer, and without a weapon, without fingerprints, and without a reliable witness account, the case quickly became difficult to solve. Still, there were leads. Some witnesses reported seeing a strange man near the campsite around the time of the murders. Descriptions varied, but the idea of an unknown outsider began to take hold. There was also suspicion around a local man who lived nearby, known for having a bad temper and aggressive behavior toward campers. Over time, stories circulated that he may have hinted at knowing something about the crime, but nothing could be proven. No solid evidence ever connected him, or anyone else, to what happened that night. As the years passed, the case slowly faded into the background, but it never fully disappeared. In Finland, the Lake Bodom murders became something bigger than just a case. It became a mystery that people couldn't let go of. How could someone commit such a brutal crime in such a quiet place and simply vanish, with no arrest, no confession, no answers? For over 40 years, that question, until 2004. More than 4 decades after the murders, investigators reopened the case. Advances in forensic science gave them a new way to look at the evidence. Things that couldn't be tested properly in 1960 could now be re-examined. And what they found led them to a shocking conclusion. They arrested Nils Gustafsson, the only survivor. The man who had spent decades being seen as a victim was now the main suspect. Prosecutors claimed that the original story didn't add up. They argued that Nils had been drinking heavily that night and may have gotten into an argument, possibly driven by jealousy or tension within the group. According to their theory, Nils attacked the others, then injured himself afterwards to make it look like he had also been a victim. They pointed again to the shoes, the blood patterns, the inconsistencies. To them, it suggested that Nils's injuries may not have happened at the same time as the others. But the defense told a very different story. They argued that Nils's injuries were far too severe for him to have carried out such an attack. A broken jaw, facial fractures, a concussion. They said it simply didn't make sense that someone in that condition could overpower 3 other people and then stage an entire crime scene. They also brought attention back to the earlier reports of a stranger near the campsite. The possibility that someone else had been there, someone who was never identified. The trial began in 2005, and for the first time in decades, the case was back in the spotlight. After hearing both sides, the court had to answer one question. Was there enough evidence to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Nils Gustafsson was responsible? In the end, the answer was no. Nils Gustafsson was acquitted, not guilty. And just like that, the case returned to where it had always been, unsolved. When you look at everything that's known about this case, it's honestly hard to land on one clear answer. But if I had to lean one way, I'd say an unknown outsider feels slightly more likely. The idea that someone approached the tent from outside, while they were asleep, fits with how sudden and chaotic everything was. There were also early reports of a strange man near the campsite that night. Nothing ever confirmed, but enough to raise questions. And then there's the investigation itself. The crime scene wasn't properly secured. People had already walked through it. So if there was an intruder, there's a real chance the evidence was lost before it could even be analyzed. But at the same time, you can't ignore why suspicion eventually fell on Nils. The blood on his shoes, the gaps in his memory, and the theory that alcohol and tension may have led to something much darker. That's what prosecutors believed decades later, that he attacked the others and then made it look like he was a victim too. But in court, that didn't hold. His injuries were serious, severe enough that it raised real doubt about whether he could have done all of that and then staged the scene. And that's the key point. The court didn't say he was innocent. They said there wasn't enough evidence to prove he was guilty. And that's why this case is still where it is today, unsolved. 3 teenagers lost their lives, 1 survived, and the truth may never be known. So what do you think really happened? Did Nils snap? Or did someone else walk out of that forest and disappear forever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.